Picture this. You walk out to your backyard in late July, and the fruit tree you babied all spring is dropping yellow leaves, right onto cracked, pale dirt. You did everything the nursery tag told you. You bought the amendments, the organic fertilizer, the mycorrhizal inoculant in the fancy pouch, and watered on schedule. You even watched 3 videos on proper planting depth, and the thing is barely alive. Meanwhile, your grocery bill keeps climbing. $6 for a pint of blueberries, $4 for a single avocado. You feel it every week. At checkout, this slow squeeze that never lets up, and the voice in your head says the same thing it always says. Maybe I'm just not good at this. Maybe my soil is too far gone. Maybe growing food is for people with better land, better climate, and a lot more time. But here is what nobody in the gardening industry wants you to sit with. The failure you're staring at in your yard is not a personal failure. It is a completely systemic one. You've been funneled into a narrow corridor of plants that were never designed for your actual ground. The trees sold at big box stores, the varieties promoted in magazines, the cultivars that dominate every nursery shelf. They were selected for one thing: performing. Inside an industrial model, rich, amended, irrigated, fertilized, sprayed, managed soil that almost nobody actually has in their backyard, without spending hundreds of dollars a season to simulate it. Think about what that means for a second. Every bag of compost, every bottle of fish emulsion, every truckload of topsoil you haul in is a subscription payment to a system that picked your trees for you before you ever broke ground. The dirt under your feet, the actual living ground you own, got written off as inadequate before you even started. Sandy, rocky, compacted, clay-heavy, nutrient-lean, whatever your patch looks like. The mainstream horticulture pipeline looked at it and said it wasn't profitable enough to breed for, so they didn't. And the cruel part is this: there are fruit trees, real ones, productive, and genuinely delicious, that evolved specifically in the kind of ground you've been told is worthless. Trees that root into rocky hillsides and sandy flats and forest floors, where nobody has ever spread a single handful of fertilizer. Trees that fruit heavily, year after year, in exactly the conditions you already have. They exist, and they've existed for thousands of years, but you have never seen them at your local garden center because they bruise on a truck, or they ripen unevenly, or their shelf life is 4 days instead of 4 weeks. So the question worth asking is not what am I doing wrong? The question is what was kept from me, and why? Because once you see that the deck was stacked right at the nursery door, the whole game changes. Here is the part that should make you angry. Every single one of those trees, the persimmon dropping fruit so sweet, it tastes like brown sugar after the first frost hits, the mulberry producing more berries than you, and every bird can eat, the juju thriving in sand and clay and alkaline dust, right where nothing else will grow. They all share one trait that the garden industry hides from you. They perform worse when you feed them. Let that land for a second. The juju is a tree cultivated for thousands of years across China. It produces fruit tasting like apples dipped in vanilla when fresh, and turns into rich, chewy dates when dried. It actually drops its fruit production when you give it that moist bed, the amended, fertilizer-soaked bed that every garden center told you to build. It pushes out leaves instead. Now zoom out. Think about what you were doing last spring. You bought bags of synthetic amendments. You tilled the bed to loosen it up. You maybe sprayed something to knock back the weeds. And every single one of those actions did the same thing. Underground, it severed the fungal network, the mycorrhizal threads that connect root to root, tree to tree, that shuttle phosphorus and water and chemical warnings across the soil. You shredded them with a rototiller and then poisoned whatever survived with a salt-based fertilizer. The mulberry doesn't need your intervention. It grows in compacted ground, in poorly drained clay, in dry gravel margins where you'd never think to plant anything ornamental. It fruits fast, it fruits heavy, and the black varieties carry a serious depth of flavor that makes grocery store berries taste like water. The reason it never shows up in nursery recommendations has nothing to do with performance. It stains concrete and it feeds birds. The persimmon is the same story told from a different hillside. American persimmons colonize eroded slopes and sandy flats. Land so degraded that the topsoil is completely gone. They don't ask for compost. They don't need raised beds lined with expensive landscape fabric. They just need you to stop burying their roots in a broken system. A system designed to sell you next month's input. Every bag of fertilizer is a subscription. So the question isn't whether your soil is good enough. Question is who convinced you it was broken in the first place? And what they were selling you the moment you believed them. Because the answer to both is the same receipt, the one sitting in your garage right now, next to the half-empty bag of triple 15 and the tiller you rented twice this year. So here is the part nobody taught you in any gardening class. The reason these trees fruit harder in garbage soil is not luck. It isn't genetics alone. Either picture the first 6 inches under a hawthorn growing sideways, right out of a limestone cliff. No topsoil, no compost, no amendments. If you slice that ground open, you'd find a dense web. It looks like white cotton candy threaded through gravel. That is mycorrhizal fungus, and it is doing something your fertilizer physically cannot do. Each thread is thinner than a human hair, but collectively, those threads extend the root system of that hawthorn by a factor of 100. They are mining phosphorus right out of rock. They are trading sugars the tree produces for minerals the tree cannot reach. And here is the critical detail. This network only activates under scarcity. Now look at what a serviceberry does. On an acidic mountainside, where blueberries would need years of babying to establish, the serviceberry sends its roots into fractured rock and immediately links into existing fungal highways that connect it to surrounding forest. Trees. It is not pioneering alone. It is joining an underground economy that has been running for ages, since way before your house was built. Nutrients flow from older trees to younger ones through these channels. Information about drought stress travels the exact same pathways. Sea buckthorn takes this a step further. It doesn't just tap the network, it manufactures its own fertility. Nodules on its roots house bacteria that grab nitrogen straight from the atmosphere and convert it into a form the plant can actually use. This is the exact same process that industrial fertilizer plants replicate, using enormous heat and pressure and fossil fuels. The sea buckthorn does it silently. Ambient temperature in sand dunes where absolutely nothing else survives. The pattern repeating across these species is always the same. Stress triggers cooperation. Scarcity activates ancient biological infrastructure. The moment you pour rich amendments onto these systems, you're not helping, you're severing connections that took decades to build. This isn't just some alternative gardening philosophy. It is measurable biology mapped with isotope tracers and electron microscopes. The code was always there, written into root chemistry and into all those fungal signaling compounds. We just buried it under a century of fertilizer marketing. And once you understand that these mechanisms exist, the next question becomes pretty obvious. Here is the move that costs nothing and changes everything. Stop improving your soil. I really mean it. Put down the bag of amendments, cancel the compost delivery, and walk away from the tiller. Because the moment you stop fighting your ground, something strange begins to happen. Think about what a fig tree actually needs, not the fantasy version from the nursery catalog, but the real biological preference of the plant. Figs want lean mineral soil with almost no organic richness. They actually want to be stressed. A Chicago hardy fig shoved into a crack of clay, next to your foundation, ignored all summer long, will outproduce the pampered specimen in your raised bed every single year, and the same is true for quince, a fruit so ancient it predates modern agriculture by millennia, thriving in rocky hillsides, where nobody ever added fertilizer. So here is your one action. Take whatever patch of ground you've been avoiding, the strip of compacted clay along the fence, the sandy corner where grass refuses to grow, the wet spot that stays soggy after rain, and do absolutely nothing to it. No digging, no amending, no fixing. Instead, just plant directly into that failure. An aronia bush goes straight into waterlogged clay, producing berries so dense with antioxidants that health food companies are scrambling to source them. An autumn olive drops right into rocky sand, and within 2 seasons is covered in tart red fruits, while simultaneously feeding the soil through its own root bacteria. The trick is not adding more labor. The trick is choosing organisms that evolved to do the labor for you. Every one of these species spent thousands of years solving the Exact problem you've been throwing money at. Pawpaws figured out how to fruit in deep shade, right on starved, acidic ground, and sea buckthorn cracked the code. On pure sand, your only job is to match the plant to the disaster. Wet clay gets the chokeberry, dry gravel gets the fig, cold exposed hillside gets the hardy. Mulberry, you're not really gardening anymore. You're placing biological machines into conditions they were designed to exploit. Onces they establish. Once those roots hit their stride, in the soil everyone else rejected, the system accelerates, fungal networks spread, leaf litter accumulates without you. Raking it, nitrogen fixers pump fertility into the ground year after year. You wake up one morning and realize something. The patch you were ashamed of is now your most productive square footage, and you did less work there than anywhere else. That is the lever, not more effort, not more spending, just one decision to stop correcting the ground and start cooperating with it. And once that system locks in, once those roots are deep and woven through the subsoil, you have something no supply chain disruption can touch. Now picture the moment everyone else dreads. The supply chain seizes up, trucks stop rolling, shelves go bare in 48 hours, and your neighbor is standing in a parking lot at dawn, fighting over the last bruised head of lettuce, wrapped in plastic, grown 1,000 miles away, in soil that needed a pharmacy just to produce it. That is the end game of dependence. That is what happens when your food exists only as a transaction between you and a system designed to extract from you at every step, but you just walk out your back door. There is a pawpaw tree dropping custard-fleshed fruit onto the ground, so fast you can't even keep up. A mulberry so loaded the birds show up like clockwork every June. And there is still way more than you can eat. A Siberian pea shrub along your fence line, quietly fixing nitrogen, handing you pods you can shell like garden peas, or dry into flour that stores for months in a jar. None of these trees asked you for fertilizer. None of them needed a soil test or a pH kit or a bag of amendments. From the garden center, they took your absolute worst ground, the compacted clay everyone said was completely useless, the sandy patch nothing would hold in, and they turned it into a living pantry that refills itself every single year. Without your permission, this is what the commercial model never wanted you to understand. Every one of these species was excluded from mainstream horticulture, not because it fails, but because it succeeds too easily. You can't sell inputs to someone whose trees thrive on neglect. You can't keep a customer dependent when their chi tree fruits in clusters every summer, regardless of what they do or don't buy. The grocery store can't compete with a persimmon that dries itself on the branch and tastes like dates, or an autumn olive loaded with lycopene that nobody had to ship across an ocean. So, understand what you're actually building. When you put one of these trees into the ground, you're not landscaping, you're not picking up a weekend hobby. You're installing a permanent, self-replicating food source that no price, spike, drought, or freight disruption, or boardroom policy decision can ever take from you. A Caragana hedge survives -40, a jujube fruits in desert. Heat on ground that cracks in summer. The people who planted these trees 3 years ago aren't worried right now. They're not watching grocery prices climb and doing math in their heads. They're pulling fruit off branches that grew while they slept, from soil they never amended, on land everyone else wrote off. That is sovereignty, and the only thing standing between you and that reality is one single tree matched to your climate, planted in the ground you already have this season.